Today we are talking about human nature. Now, this video came to me actually because I was in a hospital. I was working with a PA, and she was kind of, teaching me a few things. And she told me, as you graduate and you're going to go to the next season of your life and you're going to be a doctor, please remember to not be one of those doctors that everyone hates, that's mean to everyone, that's mean to students, that kind of takes out their frustrations, the frustrations of the job on others. And then she told me this story. And then this story takes us into learning about human nature and why we should understand human nature to understand ourselves and people we're dealing with. So this PA told me the story of Aunt Tracy. Now you at home listen to this, never forget the story of Aunt Tracy. Aunt Tracy was a Filipino nurse, and she was a family member of the person telling me this story. So Aunt Tracy was always good natured. She grew up in a family of like maybe 6 sisters. Everyone used to gossip. Everyone loved drama. Everyone used to junk talk except Aunt Tracy. She just had a natural, affinity to just kind of being on her own, not really engaging in other people's battles. And she was just kind of kind-hearted. Well, Aunt Tracy always wanted to get married. And she turned 50, never married until she met her husband at like 51. At 51, she meets this guy that's like 20 years older than her. They fall in love. They get married. She's a nurse working in New York. So they move in to a place near the hospital. So she married a rich man, right? This man I guess he was pretty well off. She married this man that was well off. They moved near the hospital. When they get there, they're living in these new houses. They have new neighbors. And Aunt Tracy was always, like I said earlier, just nice and good natured. And she noticed that she was living next to a lady that was like in her 90s or 80s. And she had family, but her family didn't really see her. The old lady was kind of sick. And Aunt Tracy being a nurse, Aunt Tracy, being tapped into, whatever helping instinct she had, she decided to help this new neighbor of her who was a Puerto Rican lady. She would kind of bring her food. It started off slowly. She would bring her food here and there. She would have conversations with her. She talked to her. And then finally, she saw that the Puerto Rican lady, really couldn't maintain herself. So Aunt Tracy offered to move the lady in with her at her house. The Puerto Rican lady accepted. So now there were 3 people living in the house. Aunt Tracy, her husband, and a Puerto Rican lady. After about 6 months of living with this Puerto Rican lady, really growing a liking to each other, really nursing the Puerto Rican lady to health, the Puerto Rican lady dies, right? So 6 months later, the Puerto Rican lady dies. Aunt Tracy is devastated. She's distraught. But, she helped the lady in her last days. Finally, after the lady dies, who used to live next door, they check her will, right? And her will is like kind of like a document you leave for when you die. So if you have a lot of money, you say, I want my money allocated in this way after I die. The Puerto Rican lady had actually put Aunt Tracy in her will. And reckon the Puerto Rican lady also had kids. She had grandkids. They never saw her, never cared for her. But Aunt Tracy, who was a complete stranger, Puerto Rican lady put her in her will. And she said in her will that she wanted all her assets to go to Aunt Tracy. So the house that was next door to Aunt Tracy's house, the Puerto Rican lady gave to Aunt Tracy when she died. All the antiques, all the money she had, she gave to Aunt Tracy. So after the lady's death, Aunt Tracy was left with about $7 million. And the family, after the death, came in and they tried to, look at the will to see if like the Puerto Rican lady had left them anything, but they had left nothing. Nothing to the sons, nothing to the daughters, only to Aunt Tracy. And yeah, finally Aunt Tracy was able to, inherit those $5 million and the house. They moved back to the Philippines and she's been retired to this day. That's the story of Aunt Tracy. A lady who was always good natured, always saw the good in people, always did what she felt was right in her heart, and always treated others as she wanted to be treated without even really expecting a net benefit. And that's what happened to her. So I tell that story to kind of begin this conversation on human nature, right? Because human nature is usually the opposite of how Aunt Tracy acted. Most people do things for you for a desired outcome. Most people repay evil with evil. So if someone feels slighted, if someone feels like you got a one-up on them, if someone feels disrespected, they're going to disrespect you back. And that's what happens in the hospital. That's what happens to most people when they bully others. And, you have a senior trying to terrorizing a younger student or something like that. It's because they're abiding by human nature. And we need to actually overcome human nature, right? So the Aunt Tracy story should tell you something like being good-natured, treating the other as you want to be treated, actually kind of like obey some cosmic laws. And by obeying these cosmic laws, life will repay you. And I firmly believe that. In the conversation of human nature, I something I've been noticing is like most people kind of get into petty arguments and petty fights, right? And when one person is angry over here and you have another person who actually also gets angry, it's two egos fighting each other. The ego needs another ego to fight. And someone told me something when I was training jiu-jitsu that actually always stuck with me. You have to understand that there are people in this world that are like well trained, right? Or they're like black belts. A black belt in martial arts is like someone that is a master at their craft. They're like the master at the martial arts. Well, there are people that are masters at arguing, at getting an emotional reaction out of you, at frustrating you. There are people that are masters at tempting you into things. And when you're someone that runs across a master at arising the ego in another, someone that's a master at, playing with other people's emotions, you can't engage in that battle, right? So if you're to grapple against the best black belt in the world, the best martial artist in the world, and this tournament, this was like $1 million tournament against the best martial artist. If you win, you get $1 million. If you lose your life or something, right? The best way to win a circumstance like that is to not even show up. Don't even show up to that tournament with that black belt grappler who's gonna win and dominate you, right? And that's the same thing about the ego. Sometimes you run across someone that is so well versed at, arising frustration in others, and the best thing to do is to not even engage in that battle, right? And then the last thing I kind of realized about human nature is that you really can't see someone that you judge. When you judge another person, you see someone and you say, okay, I'm going to put this person in this box of bad person, this person in this box of good person, this person in this box of whatever. Those people can actually never leave those categorizations, those boxes that you put in their mind. So if you see someone and let's say you see them on a day where they woke up on the left side of the bed and they're frustrated. So you categorize them as bad person. And the next day you see that person is, helping someone out on the side of the street that, crashed a car, or that person is donating to charity or something. You can't even accept that action as good because you already categorize them as bad, right? And that's the same thing as seeing someone and categorizing them as good. If they do something heinous or crazy, you can't really see that because you already in your mind made that distinction that this is a good person, this is a bad person. And quite frankly, everybody's pretty complex, right? Everyone is like a yin and yang, a mixture of dark and light. Everyone is pretty complex as human beings, and that's why you have to be self-reflective. I actually want to close off this video with one thing that I learned this week, and it's just about like accepting the truth. And you at home, you may be like, yeah, of course, I always accept the truth. Like if it's visible in front of me, I accept the truth. But not many of us do, right? In medicine, when someone comes in with, liver cirrhosis or scarring of their liver because they've been drinking for 50 years, or someone comes in with lung cancer because they've been smoking for 20 or 30 years, right? Sometimes only in those situations do people accept the truth that when you smoke, you can have negative effects to your lungs. When you drink, you can have negative effects to your liver. But sometimes the human body is the only thing that actually puts our actions in front of us, that actually reflects our actions to our face. And sometimes that's the only way to accept the truth. But you don't have to get liver cancer or lung cancer to accept that, you don't want to smoke crazy or OD. You don't want to drink excessively, things like this. It's actually pretty crazy because I read this story that most kids that die in plane crashes don't die from the impact of the crash or the damage to the plane. They actually die from smoke inhalation. So usually the impact doesn't kill them, but what kills them is smoke inhalation. So the plane crashes, they see that the plane has crashed, they're in a state of shock, and instead of getting up and moving and leaving and exiting the plane, they just sit there because they want to accept the truth that, wow, this plane has crashed, now I need to take my next step. That's the same thing of like, a kid, a 5-year-old or 6-year-old that is at his house and the house starts to burn on fire, and the kid takes the pillow and puts the pillow over his head and tries to go to sleep hoping that the fire will go away, right? It's a stress response that a lot of people have, but you have to accept the truth in front of you. You have to accept what you see, and you have to move with that information. So guys, that was a kind of quick conversation of human nature, just things that I've been noticing, things that I've been observing, things that I think hopefully may help you at home. So yeah, remember, human nature is ego versus ego. You don't want to be an ego fighter. You want to act like Aunt Tracy. So if you watch this video to the end, thank you, and I hope it helped you. See you guys. Out.